Hey everybody, Pastor Kenneth here. In our walk with God, we need a foundation. And our foundation is not just, things we pick out of the Bible or ideas that we have. God has set it up to where we can be stable, strong Christians. There's an awesome verse in Acts. It's Acts 2:42, and I'm going to read it for you. It says, "All believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer." Now, he lists 4 things in there. Now, this is in the beginning of the book of Acts, which was like the very beginning of Christians, okay? So, this is the earliest church. So, this is totally foundational things. And it's sharing with us how we should live as Christians. So I'm going to look at those 4 things that he says. The first thing he says is all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. Now the apostles, those are the ones sharing what Christianity was all about, sharing what Jesus was all about, what our relationship with God was all about. This would be like our pastors today. And so they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. How do we do that in our life today? Will we do that on Sunday mornings? We come here to church and we listen to the Word of God. We listen to what the pastor is saying. We also do that in youth group whenever we listen to a message or in a class. We're being taught by people about God and about the Word of God. Super important there. That is such a strong foundational thing that we have in our life. The second thing that he says is they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship. Fellowship is so important in our relationship with God. Now that may sound like that's like the opposite of what it should be. Like, well, who cares like how much we fellowship with other Christians? It's all about spending time with God, right? Well, that's not true. We were created to do life together with other people. It says it right there in Acts 2:42. That was one of the main things that they did was they continued in fellowship with each other. So how do we do that? Well, there's lots of ways that we do that. The first is what you're doing right now is going to church and going to youth group and going to small groups and going to life groups and doing life with each other. Hanging out with people that can sharpen you. There's another verse in the Bible that says that iron sharpens iron. Have you ever seen like someone take 2 knives and like move them back and forth like this, like they're scraping them on each other? Well, they're sharpening both of those knives. It's like back in the day, they used to have, swords to fight with. And as you fight with the sword, it gets nicked. There's like little dents in the sword. And so they would take 2 swords and move them back and forth, and iron would sharpen iron. And so that's what we are called to do with each other, is to help sharpen each other in our lives, okay? And so the second thing is fellowship. And then he says, and sharing in meals. And that's kind of part of fellowship. It's like it's not just getting together and doing some boring, talking about, a verse in the Bible, or all right, we got a fellowship with each other. Like, no, it's doing life together. We all eat. Hopefully, if we're going to live for any extended period of time, we've got to eat. And that's what they're doing. They're sharing in meals together. They're doing everyday life together. And it says even including the Lord's Supper. So that is like communion that we have. But back in the day, they would have done that as a full meal. And so they're saying all parts of our lives we're doing together as Christians. So the first thing is they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. So being founded in the Word of God, listening to what the pastors are saying about God and our relationship with Him, fellowshipping with other believers, spending time with other Christians, and sharpening each other. And the third thing is, it says they devoted themselves to prayer. And those 3 things are super important in our relationship with God. Devoting ourselves. It's interesting, he uses that word, all the believers devoted themselves. Devoted is when you're saying like I'm all in. I am dedicated to this. But it doesn't say the apostles, try to really motivate them to be devoted. No, it says they devoted themselves. This means that it wasn't their parents saying, "Hey, you really, really, really need to hang out with some Christians. You really need to pray. You really need to go to church today." No, they took it upon themselves and devoted themselves to those things. And that last thing, prayer, is super important. Spending time with God. And that can be as simple as just taking aside 5 minutes or 3 minutes with God every morning and saying, you know what, I'm going to spend a few minutes with you, God, before everything else happens. Find a time and find a place, make an appointment with God every single day, and I guarantee you will see the results in your life. So those three things, it's almost like a three-legged stool. If you've ever looked at a tripod, like a camera tripod, it's never wobbly. You know why that is because there's nothing for it to wobble on. If you have 4 legs, it's able to kind of like, one of them can be shorter and you can kind of go back and forth. Like if you've ever been at a table at a restaurant that's kind of wobbly, it's because it's got 4 legs. They should make tables with 3 legs and there would be no wobbling going on whatsoever. And those 3 things, those being founded in the Word of God and hearing the Word of God, which is what he's talking about when he says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. So the word of God, and we can do that even on our own, reading the Bible and being taught by the Word of God and by others. So that the first thing is being taught. The second thing is fellowship, and the third thing is prayer. If we have those 3 things in our walk with God, in our relationship, if that's our foundation, we won't be wobbling. We won't be moving back and forth. We'll have a strong relationship with God, and we will be able to impact our world in a mighty, mighty way. Anyway, I want to know what you think about it. Have you ever thought about that? Has that been something in your life that you've already been doing? I want to know about it, and I'll check you out in another video.